Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, the Real Impact Daily Inspiration Edition here on this very special day, this special time, this special month. We're joined by the author of Real Impact, Dennis Henson. Dennis, welcome. And this is a rather special month for a lot of different reasons. But in this case, it's going to focus on one person throughout this entire month. It's a long story, but it's broken up into some beautiful segments. We'll touch upon each one. And thank you for joining us here on this. Let's just call it Abraham Lincoln Month. How about that?
That sounds great. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We're going to start, of course, with the very first story, and that has to do with Providence. And here is that story.
Providence. Abraham Lincoln is remembered as one of America's greatest presidents, so much so that until recently his birthday was a national holiday. He's known for his log cabin birthplace, honesty, and stovepipe hat. However, he also significantly impacted the direction of our nation through watershed moments, including the Lincoln-Douglas debates, becoming the first Republican president, and the Gettysburg Address. But what most people don't know is the improbable series of events that allowed him to become the 16th president of the United States. What changed this barefoot boy, who was so poor that his pants were always too short, into one of the most successful attorneys in Illinois? What transformed the son of illiterate parents from the backwoods of Kentucky into one of the world's greatest orators? And how did that poor farm boy, with little or no schooling, become the President of the United States? Abraham Lincoln had less than the equivalent of a first-grade education, yet his speeches have been renowned as some of the most eloquent in the history of the world. How did that happen? And what circumstances prove his rise to power was Providence?
And you know, Dennis, there's one other attribute of Abraham Lincoln that I have focused on. I'm sure some folks have too. That's his facial hair, his beard. If I'm not mistaken, there were very few pictures of him or portraits or what have you where he had a mustache, but he had a beard. And then there were others where he was completely clean shaven. And I thought that was rather interesting. The typical beard with no mustache. And I don't know what that means, if that was of any significance whatsoever, along with the top hat and so forth.
A lady came up to Lincoln one time and suggested to him that he would grow a beard. He had a very long face, and the truth is he wasn't a very attractive person. He was long and lanky, and his face was it kind of caved in places. But the beard made him look so much better. It filled it out.
Mm-hmm.
He did that in response to one of his voters, and I always thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating. The other thing that the description of him, and from the means from which he came, as referred to as a barefoot boy, and in this day and age, the 21st century, how people like to compare modern day individuals who are in the political light to Abraham Lincoln. And I'm thinking, they don't hold a candle to this man. They really don't. I mean, because of where Abraham Lincoln came from.
That's exactly right. The premise of this story, the reason it's named Providence is, once you read the entire story, the question is, was this Providence or was Lincoln just lucky? Well, once you read the story, you'll see he was really not very lucky. It seemed to be divine providence, because over and over throughout the story, it came to a point where, had things not happened exactly the way they did, there would be no way we'd know Lincoln today. And that's what makes the story so absolutely intriguing.
Yeah, I think that's rather significant too. And we on this program talk all the time about choices, for example, and a lot of times, yes, we make certain choices, but yet the outside world is also moving and making choices. And you just never know what you're going to come upon as you move through your life and you make your choices, and how the universe kind of sometimes, you kind of put it this way, Dennis, the universe sometimes conspires with you and for you. And it seems like in one sense, depending upon your perspective, that's what happened with Abraham Lincoln.
More than one sense. Absolutely what happened. He shouldn't have become a successful attorney. I mean, the cards were all stacked against that happening. He shouldn't have become the president of the United States right up even after the convention where he was nominated as the Republican nominee. The chances were zero that he would become president at that time, because all the Democrats had to do is just pick a candidate and get behind the candidate. They would have won hands down, but they didn't.
Yeah. And I know that there will, in terms of the series of events that took place, some would, I can see the comparison to President 45 and 47, totally unlikely. And yet, guess what? 45 and 47. So it's not something that is impossible. As I mentioned a few moments ago, we are going to take a listen to 4 other little short snippets of the story of Abraham Lincoln. But the main reason why you included Mr. Lincoln in this incredible plethora of stories called Real Impact.
Well, it aligned with the core themes: his personal commitment, overcoming adversity over and over and over again while being extremely inspirational. And the story is cathartic. In places, it is going to bring a tear to your eye.
Mm. Who and would you say his protagonist, in a manner of speaking, was the early days of that Republican Party, or at least a group of people, again, because the odds were stacked against him, to becoming the president of the United States? Those would be considered? I mean, it seems like there was more than one protagonist in this whole story.
Well, his antagonists were in all of the environment.
Yeah.
Everything. His parents were illiterate and extremely poor. His father lost everything on a land deal. Before he was born, his parents were not that poor. They had land, but there was a dispute, and his father lost the dispute, and with it, all of his land and all of his money. So there he was with a little child and a wife and nothing. So they lived on government land. They just went and built a lean-to. There was no covered floor where he lived. And they were both illiterate. Had his father been literate, he probably could have won the land dispute. Yeah. But neither his mother or his father read or wrote. They had very few books in their home. So it took a major change, which is in the next part of the story, for him to take the next step toward becoming who he became.
Well, we'll listen to that next segment of the story. But first, I want to remind you folks that Real Impact Daily Inspiration is available. It is available in multiple formats. However, you can get right now an e-copy, an ebook copy of Real Impact by going to realimpactbook.com and filling out the little form. You're not going to be solicited in any way, shape, or form. They're going to the link will be sent for you to download the ebook so that you can read it for yourself. But it's also available at Amazon through Audible as well. You can listen to it as we are listening to it here on Tell Me Your Story. This is Tell Me Your Story. I am Richard Dugan. He is Dennis Henson, and we are talking about Real Impact, the story of Abraham Lincoln. This whole month, we are going to spend the entire month talking about Abraham Lincoln, and we are now going to move on to the next installment, if you will, the next short little piece of the story of Abraham Lincoln.
A humble beginning. The boy's life was a struggle. He was born in a tiny dirt-floor log cabin deep in the Kentucky backwoods. His father, Thomas, a cabinet maker, had recently spent his life savings purchasing their farm. Yet a title dispute cost him all his land and most of his money. Consequently, young Abe's family was forced to move several times, finally squatting in a thick, dangerous Indiana forest on government land. 7-year-old Abe once again found himself in a tiny cabin surrounded by dense woods filled with wild animals. The little boy's father gave him an axe and put him to work cutting trees, notching logs, chopping firewood, and fetching water from a stream 2 miles away. Abe's mother, Nancy Hangst Lincoln, a talented seamstress, tried hard to make her family comfortable. She cooked, cleaned, made clothes, and recited poems and scriptures from the Bible. Little Abe loved to listen and had the unique ability to hear something and repeat it almost verbatim. Neither Nancy nor Thomas had a formal education. The only books in the home were the Bible, a catechism, and a spelling book. Even though little Abe couldn't read, he enjoyed looking at the pages and longed to understand their meaning. In the following 2 years, their little farm began to take shape, but then Nancy fell ill from milk sickness. With no doctors or medicine nearby, the disease took her life in a short time. Abraham was only 9 when his precious mother passed away. The young boy was devastated. Abe remained despondent even though his sister Sarah did her best to be a mother to him. He had no way of knowing that this would be the first in a series of events that would ultimately lead him to greatness.
You know, Dennis, one of the things that I find interesting about this story of Abraham Lincoln and bringing it into the modern age, if you will, the 21st century, here into 2025, as you, I'm sure, have heard the news over the last week to 10 days, and then some, 2 weeks, what have you, of the horrendous disaster that befell Los Angeles, and all of these people who now are literally starting over. I made the comment once that the last time that these people had to start over was when they were born. They came into this world with absolutely nothing. Well, guess what? Now they're right back, so to speak, right where they started from when they came into this world. And it seems to me with Abraham Lincoln, he did have people around him who supported him, like his sister and so forth, and his mother before her passing. Do you think that that's a fair comparison, and that those people today can take note, can maybe take some inspiration and encouragement from this story, especially this particular tale?
I think they could take encouragement from all of the stories in the book, not just this one, because most of the protagonists in each of the stories experienced tremendous loss and were beaten down to the point where most people would have just given up and just said, I just can't move forward anymore. That's why the stories were chosen, because these people had desire to be better, and faith that things were going to work out, and hope, and the will to get out there and make it happen, and they were willing to take action. So people in that situation, I was just thinking the other day, I like to practice being grateful, and I was sitting in my home thinking, well, I have my home, I have all the stuff that's in it. I'd just be devastated if I lost everything, but I feel safe here in Texas. And the next morning, the house behind my house burned to the ground.
Whoa.
I thought, well, I guess you're really not safe anywhere. But to get back to your question, everybody needs some motivation sometimes. And I'm so sympathetic toward those people. I wish I could give each one of them one of these books, and maybe it would give them a little bit of a boost and some inspiration, but they'll get through it. They live in the wealthiest country in the world. The opportunities are still unlimited. I've personally lost everything more than once. So I've lived in a car. Just, you just keep going on, trying to have a positive outlook, and things will change. There's a quote in the book that says, it's a short quote, this too will pass. And it will. 5-10 years from now, those people, most of them will look back and say, well, that was a hard time, but we've come through it, and things have a tendency to heal, just like your body does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's interesting how I can share that kind of an experience as you just shared what happened with you. My first wife and I were living in a trailer park in a trailer. And one evening, all of a sudden, we're hearing this crackling sound. We're not sure where it's coming from. We go out, and the trailer behind us was on fire. And I immediately grabbed our garden hose just to keep it from spreading. And I was spraying the trees, not the trailer. The trailer was a goner. When a trailer catches fire, forget about it. I just didn't want the fire to spread from tree to tree, and then the whole trailer park goes up. So fortunately, we were able to get it put out, and at least keep it from spreading, I guess is the way I want to put it. But yeah, it's remarkable the challenges that sometimes Mother Nature brings us. And I know too that just as a side note here, that a lot of people have a lot of criticism for people in authority during this particular crises that they had down in Los Angeles with the fires. I just remind people, though, that when the fires started, regardless of how they started, the winds were upwards of 100 miles an hour. You could have had 5,000 fire trucks, 1.5 million firefighters, and they would have not been able to stop it from spreading, because those embers were traveling, I have heard, upwards of 2 miles. And that's what happens in those situations. And we've had a situation here in the Santa Barbara County where we had what was called the Thomas Fire that came all the way from northern Ventura County. And we didn't think it was going to come here. Although I was talking with an expert who said, oh no, it's coming here, because all of the conditions were ripe for it. And sometimes you just don't know what's going to happen. This is a fascinating story about a man who lived almost. It's hard for me to believe this, Dennis. Almost 200 years ago. I know we still got a couple of decades to go. I do understand that. But still, and he not only grew up in tumultuous times in his own personal life, but then he faced a very tumultuous time, which we'll get into down the road here, because of the fact that two sides of an argument couldn't get along, and so they went to fisticuffs and then some. And we'll get into that as well. As we do continue, I'm Richard Dugan. He is Dennis Henson, author of Real Impact. RealImpactBook.com is the website where you can go, and you can even order whatever version of the book you'd like, hardcover, paperback, Kindle. If you do have unlimited Kindle, you can actually get the book for free. But you can also, if you don't have unlimited Kindle, you can still get it for free. You can get an ebook. All you have to do is fill out that little form there on the page, scroll down there and fill it out, and you won't be solicited. I make that mention every time because I think it's important, because I know that I get annoyed when I start getting emails after all I had was a question, and now all of a sudden I'm being inundated with all kinds of emails. You won't get that from Dennis and his website. Yes, Dennis.
Richard, they need to scroll down to the bottom. Once they go to the website, there's a link right there to the right that says The Mystery of the Lamp, which has a recording on it. You should listen to that. That's really powerful. But then scroll down to the bottom where it says podcast attendee, and click on that, and then it gives you 3 gifts. And the middle gift is the free ebook. So
absolutely.
Go and get your gifts, and there's no strings, like Richard said. If you want to be notified when I finish the books I'm working on, you can click the link that says notify me when you have another book. So I'm working on Real Impact 2, Real Impact 3. Let's see, The 7 Secrets of Success.
Mm.
Burning Desire, that's going to be a good one. I'm writing about some people that are alive today, some friends of mine that's just amazing people. The name of that book's Burning Desire and The Laws of Nature. So I got a lot in front of me, plus I'm doing a series on real estate investing. So I'm a pretty busy guy right now.
You know, I find it fascinating that you people who retire end up being busier than when you were working.
I never stopped working.
Well, folks, we're not going to stop either, although we're going to take a quick pause here as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. Welcome back to Tell Me Your Story with Dennis Henson. He is the author of Real Impact, The Daily Inspiration. And Dennis, we're going to take a listen to the next installment of the story of Abraham Lincoln having to do with a new mother.
A new mother. The next providential event occurred when Thomas, knowing he needed help, left little Abe and Sarah alone and headed back to Kentucky. Upon his arrival in Elizabethtown, he learned that a previous acquaintance, Sarah Bush Johnston, had recently become a widow. So Thomas visited her and made his proposal. "I have no wife, and you no husband. I came a purpose to marry you. I know you from a gal, and you knowed me from a boy. I've no time to lose, and if you're willin', let it be done straight off." The following day, Sarah and Thomas were married in a log house on Elizabethtown's main street. When the two, along with Sarah's 3 children, returned to the Indiana cabin, little Abe and sister Sarah were excited to have a mom again and relished their new playmates. They also appreciated their help in the fields. The merged family quickly bonded, and Abe's new stepmother loved him as much or more than her own children. And when Mother Sarah saw the makings of a great man in him, another remarkable event took place. After learning of a school opening several miles from their farm, Sarah enrolled young Abe. She saw that he attended the classes each day. Abraham loved school and appreciated learning. He even created his own Book of Sums to help him with math problems. Nancy Hanks Lincoln's cousin, Dennis Hanks, joined them at the farm for an extended stay during this period. While there, he taught young Abe his ABCs and helped him with reading. Because Abe's father cared little about his education and needed his help, Abe was forced to drop out of school. Yet with his new mother's encouragement, he never stopped studying. Sarah kept him at his lessons and gifted him her books. Soon young Abraham was spending his free time reading books such as The Life of Washington, Aesop's Fables, Pilgrim's Progress, and the King James Bible. He even took his books to the field to read while plowing and resting his horse.
I will tell you, anybody who takes their books out to plow today on a big piece of heavy machinery, not a good idea. But in that case, during his time, it was perfectly appropriate because you were probably using oxen or horses or what have you. And I will say something to you, Dennis, that that used to frustrate me, that there are so many classics out there. There are so many books that I want to read, and there just isn't enough time. And yet he grabbed whatever he could to read. I thought that to me is so fascinating.
Did you notice that? Okay, his father left the children for 3 months out in the woods.
Yeah.
He left them, and they were little. I mean, they were 9 and 7 years, very, very young children. And he went and made a proposal to a woman he didn't even know. He found out she was divorced when he got back home. Not divorced, but widowed. She was widowed. And so he went to her home and made that ridiculous proposal. If she had said no, we wouldn't know the name Abraham Lincoln, because it was her that took him under her wing and saw that he got some education and started him in that direction. Had that not happened, it wouldn't be a name we know today. It was like a miracle.
Well, once again, divine providence, I think, is probably, it's fair to say, divine providence indeed. And it also helps to hammer home, I think, the message of the importance. And again, this is taking nothing away from present fathers, don't get me wrong, but actually goes to show how important mothers are. I remember my father, he sort of, at least when he first shared this with me, it was sort of in a despairing way, disparaging way, that he did not think that he really had that much of an influence on us as children, and yet he was a present father. And when in one of my interviews, they sort of described the comparison between mothers and fathers and that nature of the parent, of the father parent and the mother parent. And I took a different perspective on what my father said. And it wasn't that he didn't feel like he was important, but he gave, if you will, honor and homage, if you will, to my mother and her role as the mother of the children. I look now on what he said and think, no, he wasn't feeling poorly about himself and his role. He was just saying, hey, your mother deserves so much more, shall we say, credit than I for raising you all, and that's what this woman did here for Abraham Lincoln. And once again, without her, we wouldn't even know the name. It's really something.
Right.
Well, Dennis, we're going to go ahead. I'll let you go ahead and continue if you'd like.
No, that was it.
I was going to tell the folks that you're listening to Tell Me Your Story. We're talking about Real Impact. Real Impact, and it is a daily inspirational book. You want to get yourself a copy. I happen to have my paperback as well as my Audible and Kindle, and I'm very excited about being able to bring this series of programs this year to folks. Live in 25, this series of stories and poems and quotes and lists of books. He's got two lists of books. One's the bibliography, and the other is a list of books at the back of Real Impact, of those books that have inspired him, that have lit him up, if you will. And I don't know if you have this one book in your list, but the one that has lit me up, in addition to Real Impact, is, I've shared this before, the book The Goal. That's a dramatization, a wonderful book to listen to from Audible. That basically says, just because we've always done it this way, does that mean we always have to do it that way? And when I think about Abraham Lincoln and the life that he lived early on, his upbringing, walking around barefoot and so forth, I think that it's just from what little I know of him, from these stories and these little segments that we're playing, he had that sort of attitude that there he was reading while plowing. Well, you don't, just because you haven't read while plowing doesn't mean you can't, right? And so you're plowing, you're tilling the soil, but you're also tilling the mental or intellectual soil. And that's what he was doing. He was doing those both at the same time. And I think that that's extraordinary. And the seed, of course, was the books, the information, the philosophy, if you will, all of the different things that he gained from that made him who he became. And I just think that's extraordinary, Dennis. I really do.
I do too. The man was remarkable, so much so that when I wrote the book, there were 16,000 books about him. There's about 19,000 now.
Wow.
On one person. So he's pretty interesting guy.
He certainly is, and I would take it that more books have been written about him than any of our other post-revolutionary individuals.
Well, yeah, I can't think of any other person that has that many books written about other than Jesus or religious leader of some kind.
Exactly. Real Impact, daily inspiration. We hope you get your copy by going to realimpactbook.com. Scroll down to the bottom and click on the, what is it, a podcast attendee?
Yes.
Yep. Click on that and put in the information, and also go back and listen to that little audio about Aladdin's lamp. And we will listen to more as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. Welcome back to Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host. Dennis Henson is my, well, I want to say co-host on this series of programs here on Tell Me Your Story. This is the Real Impact series. And we are going to take we're going to take a listen to the next installment having to do with The Boy's Habit.
The Boy's Habit. Young Lincoln became a virtual vacuum, eagerly consuming every book, newspaper, pamphlet, article, or anything else he could find to read. For years, he read by firelight deep into the night and resumed at the first sign of the sun. Although he completed his chores, he had marked preference for reading, writing, and ciphering. Once he had read and reread the books in his home, Abraham walked to the nearest trail. He befriended any hunter, trader, peddler, or politician who chanced by. If a traveler had a book, Lincoln was sure to have a look. He even borrowed from his neighbors and once boasted, "I've read every book within 50 miles of my home." He read texts such as Nicholas Pike's New and Complete System of Arithmetic and Thomas Dilworth's New Guide to the English Tongue, and classics like Robinson Crusoe, Benjamin Franklin's autobiography, and anything else he could find. Although he became more knowledgeable through reading, the teenager realized that his grammar was inferior, and though he was surrounded by illiterate parents and neighbors, he knew where to find help and was quoted as saying, "The things I want to know are in books. My best friend is the man who will get me the book I ain't read." Abraham continued to work in the fields throughout his teens, swinging his axe and reading. In those days, it was the custom for families to rent out their children until they turned 21, and Thomas made prime use of that custom. So, in addition to his chores, Abraham was obligated to chop trees, split fence rails, and do other work for his neighbors. With all that physical labor and reading, he eventually became a knowledgeable and muscular young man. Young Lincoln always carried a book, and it was common to see him with an axe in one hand and a book in the other. But as time passed, he grew weary of his labor and began to resent his father. When he was 22, his family moved again, settling in central Illinois. After that move, Abraham left his family to seek his fortune and took whatever honest work he could find. Yet he especially liked sailing cargo down the Mississippi River on flatboats. The main reason was the boat owners brought a stack of newspapers and a copy of A History of the United States. So on these trips, Abe had more to read than ever before.
Extraordinary. And it seems to me that he would have even, and as he did travel more, he extended his library, if you will, of those books that he read the further he traveled. Because if it's only 50 miles out, initially, you keep going 100 and 200 and what have you, and you get somebody with a book or a periodical. Again, I think what was mentioned, a pamphlet, newspapers, of course, and ravenous reader. And I have a feeling that quote might have been, if he was concerned about his grammar, probably would have been rephrased later in his life instead of ain't, haven't. Just a thought.
Made the point when he made that quote. It made the point that he knew he needed to improve.
Yeah.
And that kind of really hammered it in. He did need to improve, but he knew it, and he did, and he became such a wonderful orator. The Gettysburg Address. that was a pretty great speech coming from someone who came from parents who were illiterate, who only had less than a first grade education. So he came a long way, and what got him there is pretty obvious.
And back then, you did not have speechwriters. You wrote your own.
He wrote that in the train on the way to the grave site in Gettysburg.
And most people probably know how it starts. 7 years ago, I believe it was our fathers, or is it forefathers, brought to this continent a new nation, and that's about as far as I can go with that right now, if any of that's correct. But I know that
right.
It was an extraordinary speech that spoke a great deal. I wonder if there are any orators today who even come close to the level that Abraham Lincoln. I mean, it seems to me like he set the bar pretty high in those days.
Well, it probably was surpassed when Churchill came on the scene, but that was what, 100 years later,
Yeah, yeah.
almost.
And I know that he was faced, that being Abraham Lincoln, again, he was faced with that tumultuous time we refer to as the Civil War. I mean, I've heard different stories about different conflicts that the United States has been involved with, but that I'd have to say was, from what I have read, the most brutal. Certainly, I hear about the stories from World War I and so forth, but you're talking about fellow Americans fighting each other. And it's brutal, but it's also very, very sad, you know, that we have to we have to get to that level. And that was only what was that? 60, 70, 85. I was only 85, roughly 85 years after the founding of the country, you know, and that we couldn't seem to settle our differences otherwise. And there he was in the midst of all of this.
He was, I guess, having mentioned Churchill, it seems like wars bring out great speeches from leaders.
Yeah.
But
Indeed.
actually, look, I didn't go into the war. I ended it
Right.
when he became president. I did that purposely.
Mm-hmm.
There was still a lot. There was still a lot to be written
Sure.
about Lincoln, but the whole gist of this story is, was it providence or was he lucky? Because we're about to come up on this next section to another spot where it's just a miracle. I mean, it's just no way around it that what happened there shouldn't have happened. It's just one in a billion
Yeah.
that this happened. But I'll wait till we play it to discuss that further.
Absolutely. And we will do that in just a moment. A reminder, this is the Real Impact series here on Tell Me Your Story with yours truly, Richard Dugan, as well as Dennis Henson, author of Real Impact, Daily Inspiration. Daily Inspiration, we hope that you make it as such, a daily part of your routine, if you will, maybe your daily meditation. You can also go to realimpactbook.com and get a free ebook by scrolling to the bottom and going to podcast attendee and putting in the information. You'll not be solicited for anything. You'll receive the link to download your ebook. If you have ultimate or unlimited Kindle, you can actually listen. You can actually read it for free. It's available in Audible format as well as paperback and hardcover. And we hope that you will get your copy of it as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. Welcome back to Tell Me Your Story. And in our final segment here on the program regarding this part of Abraham Lincoln's story, we now talk about or have this portion of the story on it's a very interesting title to this segment of the story. Take a listen.
Marooned. The following year, Abraham continued to do odd jobs and ferry cargo. Fate stepped in on his last voyage when his flatboat became stranded on a sandbar near New Salem, Illinois. As the crew struggled to free the vessel, a large crowd formed. The town's citizens watched as a tall, lanky fellow took charge. Under his direction, the crew members unloaded the cargo from one side, causing the boat to shift. Then the impressed observer witnessed the boy go ashore, locate a copper shop, and borrow an auger. He then drilled a hole in the boat's bow, which allowed water to drain out of the boat to ease over the dam. The flatboat's owner, Denton Offutt, was impressed with Abraham's handling of this incident. He liked what he'd seen of New Salem, so he pledged to return to open a general store and asked Abe to join him in that venture. When the young ferryman agreed, he unknowingly took his next step toward his ultimate destiny. Imagine that. With more than 800 miles of shoreline, Abraham Lincoln's flatboat marooned precisely on the shores of New Salem, Illinois, a town most likely the only one along that voyage which contained a debating society.
A debating society, probably somewhat similar to today's version of Toastmasters, where, as a member myself, I learned how to, I think, speak better, a little more succinctly and clearly. Never really got into debating, but that seems to be a technique, a skill that seems to be a little bit lost because now it's just shouting and being angry and so forth. That's not debating. That is not getting your point across, but that's what he participated in. Dennis?
Wasn't that something that flatboat marooned precisely on the only place in 800 miles, 16 if you take it both ways, that had a debating society, and he actually moved there because the captain said, well, I like this little town. I'll start a general store here. Do you want to work? And Lincoln said, yes. So he came back and went to work at the general store, and someone listened to him and said, well, you should join the debating society. Then they talked him into going into politics. So had the flatboat not marooned in exactly that point, Lincoln would have never entered in politics, probably. Isn't that amazing? And we wouldn't know his name. That's just one more of those, I don't know what you call them. It's just one in a million things that happened over and over and over that led to him becoming the president. To me, it's just, it has to be Providence.
Absolutely. You know, I'm sure you've seen these videos of people setting up these dominoes, and they will set them up in all different colors and designs and the whole thing. And then all of a sudden, okay, it's time. They hit the first one and down they all go. One follows the next and the next and the next until it reaches the end. And then it just looks so miraculous and so beautiful. And I suppose that's a very good example or analogy of what happened with Abraham Lincoln. Every domino was in the right position at the right time for him to move forward in his life. I think, though, what's sad, and I don't know that you, because we have yet to get to that point, talk about this at all in this story, and that is, of course, his unfortunate demise. That was the one domino we didn't want to see fall. But nonetheless, up to that point, what a remarkable life.
That just proves that he wasn't lucky. I mean, that's kind of to the story. Mm-hmm. Lincoln was not a lucky man. He wasn't born into money. He wasn't born into a comfortable life. His father was not good and kind to him. He was mean to him. He rented him out. Everything he did seemed to fall apart. He just had such a tough life. So luck didn't enter into the picture for Lincoln.
Yeah.
Providence must have, because this was just the second or third domino, and we still have a long part of the story to go. And some of these next things are even more amazing.
Yeah. And we will get into those in our next installment here in the month of February, as we, of course, celebrate what is referred to today as President's Day. But we used to have two separate days, one for Washington and one for Lincoln. And they combined the two of them. And for right or wrong or good or bad, that is where we are. But here we are going to talk about Abraham Lincoln, his story as it appears in Real Impact. And Real Impact, Daily Inspiration is the book we're talking about. And we're not trying to come across as, per se, an infomercial. It's more information, maybe infotainment, if you will. We're trying to entertain you, but also inform you and inspire. Part of what Tell Me Your Story is all about, as well as what Real Impact and Dennis Henson are all about, is to inspire both you and us, both of us. We want to be inspired too, to continue to make strides forward. There's as perfect as I have said we all are. We are all perfect because we're here, because we're alive and we're breathing and we're living and we're doing. But there's always room for improvement. And that's what we're always doing. You buy a brand new house, you live there a few years and say, you know what, I want to knock down this wall, or I want to do this and that. And you say, I want to make it a little bit more mine. Well, through these series of stories and this series that we are doing here on Tell Me Your Story, that's part of the process. And Dennis, I want to thank you so much for being a part of this process.
Well, I appreciate it very much, and it's lots of fun.
Absolutely. And folks, I hope you're having fun as well as we wrap this particular edition of Tell Me Your Story up. And we remind you, Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast. Love Talal. Jeanette, I am still listening. Mike, my good friend and partner in crime, you left too soon. To my best friend, Doug, I'll see you on the other side. And to my dear friend, Zorro, aho, aho.